We are live on YouTube. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Our guest this evening is Sara Cooper. This week is Mental Health Awareness Week, and Sara has agreed to join us this evening to talk about mental health awareness, but also to talk about Raphael. Sara is a psychoanalytic psychotherapist with many years' experience. She was a social worker with Norwood Childcare and qualified as a therapist in 1989 from the Guild of Psychotherapists. She has taught and supervised psychotherapists and counsellors, as well as having a private psychotherapy practice. She has been clinical director of Raphael since 2009. Thank you, Sara. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening. Well, thank you for the introduction, and I'm delighted to be speaking to you all. As David said, this is Mental Health Awareness Week, and in fact, it's the second Mental Health Awareness Week this year. The first one, I think, was instigated by Jamie as more of a Jewish Mental Health Awareness Week. And this one is a general Mental Health Awareness Week, which was instigated by the Mental Health Foundation, where one of the themes is about people connecting to nature as a way of helping with mental health. But I think that there's no coincidence that this year we have two Mental Health Awareness Weeks, because I think that one of the things that the pandemic has really highlighted is the difficulties that people face emotionally and psychologically in the situation we found ourselves this year in lockdown, where many people have been isolated, where there have been many deaths, and the fear and anxiety caused by the pandemic. So all of those things have exacerbated the kind of emotional difficulties that people might be having anyway. But I know that you had a speaker from Jamie in the previous Mental Health Awareness Week. And I just want to say something about the difference between what they deal with and what we deal with. Obviously, we work very closely together. We're both Jewish organisations who deal with mental health. And in fact, we use Jamie's premises, the Martin B. Cohen Centre in Edgware, for our counselling, or at least we did until the pandemic. At the moment, everybody's working remotely. But what Jamie deals with is mental illness. And I think there's often a confusion about what is meant by mental health. You know, sometimes when people talk about mental health, that's really what they're talking about. People who might suffer from mental illness, people who are bipolar, who are schizophrenic, people who are really quite ill. And Jamie really cater for those people. They run groups, they have some flat accommodation. You know, it's a wonderful service for that particular group within the community. And what Raphael do is something different. Although we do work alongside Jamie, they often refer people to us. So I will say, now I'll explain a bit about Raphael, and I will go through our history, our organisation, and basically what we do. So we were set up in 1979. So that's over 40 years that we have been serving the Jewish community. And originally, the service was set up under the auspices of the Reform movement. And it was set up because there was a sense that many Jewish people would feel more comfortable in coming to a Jewish organization. They would feel better understood by Jews who would know something about the culture. Now, I sometimes say that there's something about the language even. You know, if somebody says to me, I've got a broigus with my family, I know what they mean. But if you go to a non-Jewish counsellor, I guess you're not even going to say that, because you wouldn't expect them to know. So it was felt that Jews might feel better understood by a Jewish counsellor. But for quite a long time, we have been under the auspices of, across the board, of the different Jewish communities. So our patrons are the chief rabbi, the Sephardi chief rabbi, and the head of the Reform movement. So I think it's at least 10 years we have been, well, we've always served the whole of the Jewish community, but originally it was set up under the Reform movement. And when I say we serve the whole of the Jewish community, actually, you don't have to be Jewish to come and see us. So I would say that I think it's 99.9% of the people who use our services are Jewish. But, you know, if somebody was, say, a partner of a non-Jewish partner of someone who's Jewish, or they worked for a Jewish organization and they felt more comfortable with a Jewish counseling service, we don't turn anybody away for religious reasons or religious affiliations. All of our counsellors, however, do need to be Jewish. And that's because we were set up, as I said, with the understanding that people would feel better understood by a Jewish counsellor. Interestingly, our supervisors don't have to be Jewish. And indeed, my post technically wouldn't have to be somebody Jewish, although I think it would be difficult to know quite how somebody in my position would be able to work if they weren't Jewish, because I think, you know, I'm working with Jews. I have a very good understanding of the Jewish community. You know, I'm part of the Jewish community. I'm just going to take some water, if you don't mind. So, as I said, we have patrons from across the board. We also have rabbinic consultants, so that if there was a question about Jewish practice or something, we actually do have rabbinic consultants to whom we can turn, again, from different parts of the Jewish community. Then we also have a board of trustees, of which Martin Korn, who you see, I'm just going to embarrass you, Martin. Sorry, Martin is one of our trustees, so I'm delighted to see him here. So we have a chair, treasurer, an administrator who is an absolute treasure, and a group of trustees. And I meet with that. We all meet 3 or 4 times a year to discuss all of different aspects of Raphael. The trustees meet separately, and then I meet with them, and councillor reps meet with them. And we also have friends and angels, who are friends of people who organise events to raise money for us, and angels, which, if you want to become an angel, you are very welcome, are people who might want to donate regularly to Raphael. And that's a really important part of our service, because we don't turn anybody away for lack of money. We do say that people have to pay something, because I think that if people have a free service, they tend to take it for granted. I have experience of working in a free service, in a bereavement service, not a Jewish one. And I know that sometimes if a service is free, people, they turn up, they don't turn up, they're not paying, so it's not a big deal. So we do feel it's really important that people pay something, but at the same time, some people can only pay very little. So we do, donations are always welcome. We do need ways of subsidizing the money we get from our clients. So, as I said, all of our counsellors are Jewish. Often counsellors come to us when they're in training. So as part of counselling training, people are expected to have a placement, to see clients on a voluntary basis in order to get the experience, and to do that under supervision. So we have a number of supervisors, and our counsellors are all in a Raphael supervision group. And as I say, counsellors often come to us when they're in training, but often they stay with us, sometimes for years. We do have counsellors who's been with us for many years, and we're really grateful for that. And indeed, if you know anybody who is training as a counsellor or indeed qualified, we are looking for new counsellors, because we really are getting a huge number of referrals of people wanting counselling. And Raphael is a member of the British Association of Counselling. So we are very careful about practicing ethically and making sure that we do everything properly. So how do people come to see us? We have an intake team, and we have an answer phone so that anybody who wants to be seen by Raphael can either ring and leave a message on the answer phone, or they can email. And messages on the answer phone are picked up a number of times a day, and similarly with emails. So somebody will contact Raphael and say, I need some help. And one of the intake counsellors will then get back to them very quickly and just check out, just to make sure that we're the right service for them. So if, for example, they were really wanting practical advice, we would be able to direct them elsewhere. Similarly, if, for example, somebody is too unwell for the kind of counselling we offer, which is weekly counselling, and we feel that they're too disorganised, for example, we would put them in touch with a suitable service. So the first thing would be the intake people checking out, is this really the right service for this person? If they feel it is, then they will have an assessment with one of the intake counsellors. So they will really go into depth about the person, their history, their issues. They will find out as much about them as they can to get a sense of them, of what they're looking for, and also to get a sense of which counsellor might be suitable for them. I mean, sometimes some of the making a shidduch between counsellor and client is due to practicalities. During the pandemic, because everybody's been working remotely, people can, lots of people can work in an evening or during the day, but when we've got only a limited number of rooms, then there needs to be a room available at a time that somebody can do. And for example, if somebody says, well, I can only be seen in an evening because I work during the day, or whatever the reason, we would need to find a counsellor who could see them at that time. So making a shidduch is quite complicated in terms of finding the right time for somebody, and also finding a counsellor who would be the right sort of person, so that, for example, if somebody seems to be quite complicated, we wouldn't match them with a very new counsellor. You know, that would not be fair, it would not be useful. So the intake counsellors really think very carefully about who would be the right counsellor for that client. And then what they do is they will contact the supervisor of the counsellor to check whether they're happy with this client, but they will also give the counsellor the name of the client, because, as we know, the Jewish community is very small, and we have to be so careful about confidentiality. So, you know, the intake counsellor will ring the counsellor and say, do you know Joe Cohen? And if they say, oh, yes, I do, you know, they're a distant relative, or they're friends with my friends, they won't give them any more information. That will be it. But if the counsellor says, no, I don't know that person, there's no connections, then they will be given information about the client, and they will discuss in supervision whether this is a suitable client for them to see. And then the counsellor will set up an initial session to meet the client, and the counselling is then weekly at the same time every week. So again, that's one of the reasons why, if somebody's very disorganised, if they're very mentally unwell, the kind of counselling we offer is probably not suitable. You know, some people, if they're very disorganised, they can't manage to come when they're expected to come. So, you know, there are other services that might be more appropriate. So, as I said, in terms of premises, up until now, we're using the Martin B. Cohen Centre, which I don't know whether any of you know it, but as I say, it's run by Jamie. But during the pandemic, everybody is, you know, a lot of counsellors and therapists, most people are working remotely, as we are doing now. So people have been occasionally on the phone with clients. If a client, for example, doesn't have a computer, they may not have that resource, then they would need to speak to the counsellor on the phone. But most of the work is being done remotely on Zoom or other remote platforms. I'm hoping that at some point we might be able to go back to seeing people in person, but obviously it's something we really need to think about. And the counselling rooms in the Martin B. Cohen Centre are actually quite small and windowless. So I don't know when it might be possible for people to be seen in person. But obviously these are things that everybody is aware of, whether it's a counselling organisation or any other kind of organisation, the real importance of making sure everybody's safe. So who do we see? As I said, most of our clients are Jewish. We see individuals, we also see couples. And interestingly, sometimes they may not even be a married couple. You know, recently we had a mother and daughter who wanted to see us, or you might have a mother and a sister who want to resolve issues. So it's not necessarily, you know, husband and wife, or it could be a couple who are thinking of who are in a relationship, and perhaps thinking about getting married. So we will see, we have some counsellors who are trained in couples counselling, and we do sometimes see couples, although the majority of our work is with individuals. People who come to us and really are wanting help and advice, as I said, we would refer to the appropriate agency. And similarly, as I say, if people are too mentally unwell for what we offer, we would refer them usually to Jamie. We had a referral this week of somebody who said, I don't really think the counselling is what I want. What I really want is more just somebody to chat to. And something like that, we will think about what befriending services are available. And again, we will put them in touch with the appropriate service. So what kind of issues do we deal with? As I say, it could be any emotional issues, depression, stress, anxiety, bereavement. There is a Jewish bereavement service, and often where people are coming specifically with a bereavement, they might choose to go to the Jewish bereavement service rather than us. But often people have multiple issues, and bereavement may be part of that. So again, we deal with bereavement, panic attacks, low self-esteem, relationship difficulties, and of course, second generation Holocaust issues. Or, it could be even third generation now. But inevitably within the Jewish community, there are issues and it may not even be Holocaust issues. Sometimes it's, we see people from other parts of the Jewish community as well, where there have been traumas to do with people relocating from different countries, whether it's part of the Sephardi world or Eastern Europe. So all of those things are issues that we might deal with. And obviously, as Jews, these are things that we're particularly aware of. And indeed, we have 2 training days a year. We have a Raphael Day when we have meetings where the counsellors can discuss issues, but we also have a workshop or a talk. And interestingly, the talk we just had was about intergenerational trauma, particularly in relation to the Holocaust, and the way in which issues about Holocaust experience can be passed on through a family, often because nothing is spoken of, or because of the anxiety and stress carried by people who have gone through those traumatic experiences. Money. Clients are all expected to make a contribution to the counselling. As I said, we don't have anybody who pays absolutely nothing. We have just introduced a fee structure, and the counsellor will talk to the client at the beginning about, where they see themselves in terms of their earnings and their outgoings. But if somebody can only pay very little, then we do have a system of applying for a lower fee. And as I say, we don't turn anybody away for lack of money, but we very rarely have had anybody who's paid absolutely nothing, because we feel it's really important that people are valuing what they're getting for the service. But as I said, we do have friends and what we call angels, who are people who give regular donations to Raphael, and all of those things do really help. And in fact, during the pandemic, the friends haven't held the events that they would normally hold for Raphael. So normally they hold concerts and comedy events and all sorts of things. And that's been a real loss and a loss of income. So that's the friends. And I think that's probably a lot of information. I'm sorry I hope it hasn't bombarded you too much with information, but you're very welcome to ask questions.
Thank you, Sarah. Very, very interesting. I just wonder, for anybody who wishes to ask a question, if you'd like to show your virtual hand, or you can ask a question in the chat room. You could try and wave, though we don't tend to see those, but maybe Phil is more au fait with waving than I am. But Sarah, you mentioned something before. You said that sometimes it's not right for you and you would pass them on to Jamie. And I just wonder what the difference then between counselling and chatting to is. To me, that would be very much the same.
Okay, that's a very, very interesting question. Thank you. Counselling is really a process of trying to address issues. So, you know, somebody might come, as I said, they might come, for example, with a bereavement, and they would want to talk through want to talk through their relationship with the person they've lost, their feelings about it, and hopefully gradually to come to terms with the loss. Now, I think that's different from, I feel a bit lonely, I just want to have a bit of a chat with somebody. So that's really the difference. And as I say, I think there are befriending services, and Jamie certainly offers sort of drop-in services. And I think that Jewish Care offer a befriending service as well. So those are really opportunities for somebody if they just, I'm a bit lonely, I just want a bit of a chat.
Right. And how effective is it, obviously over the last year, how effective has it been speaking to people over the phone as opposed to meeting them face to face?
I think personally it's much more difficult because you can't see their expression and you can't tell if, for example, they're silent, you can't tell what's going on. Whereas if I can see you, if you're silent, I can see that you're thinking, for example. So I think working on the phone is very difficult and not many people have been doing that. But obviously if somebody doesn't have a computer or a phone that they can use, then that it may have to be the case. Okay, somebody's just said that Jewish Care do have a befriending service, which is what I thought. And it so happens today we had somebody saying, I don't really want counselling, I want befriending. And I did suggest that the intake person put them in touch with Jewish Care. So thank you for mentioning that, Faye. Yeah.
Unlike, well, I don't know if it's unlike physical issues, but a physical issue, for instance, if I were to say, if somebody, just as an example, didn't go to shul on a Shabbos morning, and somebody phoned up and said, why weren't you there? And they'd say, well, I had a stomachache, I twisted my ankle. It's something physical. Does anybody open up to something and say, I had mental health problems this morning, and that's why I couldn't be there? Do people open up at the same level about mental health issues as they do as physical health issues?
Well, I think they do in a counselling situation. I mean, you wouldn't do that to a casual acquaintance. So
that's what I'm talking about. If somebody phoned up and said, why weren't you around?
Yeah, exactly. No, and they would most likely say, I had a stomachache or whatever. They're not going to say, I would imagine. I mean, some people might say I was depressed, but on the whole, people might find it more difficult to say I was depressed. Whereas part of the value of counselling is that they know that this is a safe space where they can say what they like.
And at what point? So an awful lot of people find stress at work. So at what point is stress moving into stress as a mental health issue?
I don't think there's a kind of scale for that. I mean, it's very interesting because there are lots of these scales that have been devised to measure all sorts of things. I mean, I I have in the past done a little bit of work for employee assistance programs, and they do all sorts of assessing your level of stress for this, that, and the other. Personally, I think that that's not terribly helpful. So that for one person, they would say, you know, I was devastated because my car wouldn't start. And somebody else would, you know, take that in their stride, and would say, you know, I was really upset because, you know, I suffered death of a relative. So I think what each of us find different things stressful, and different things stressful at different times. You know, I think that's one of the issues about the pandemic, that when you're more isolated and there's a sense of, you know, this pandemic going on in the background, it could well be that things that you might have felt were a bit trivial and not any big deal, suddenly become much more disturbing to you. And the thing about counselling is valuing whatever somebody brings. So, you know, if you say to me, you know, if somebody I'm seeing says, I'm feeling anxious, I take it seriously, even though what they're anxious about might seem trivial to me. You know, that's not the point. The point is they're feeling anxious about this issue, and that means it's important to them and important to explore and help them manage it.
I was having a look at the website for the Mental Health Foundation, and there was an interesting line at the beginning of what they say, whether it's a slogan or a strap line or otherwise. It says, prevention is at the heart of what we do. And my question is, how does one prevent mental health problems? Is that what they mean?
I don't know what they mean, obviously, but I do think, you know, that the point about counselling is hopefully to alleviate the, mental health issues. And sometimes it can prevent things getting worse. I mean, we've certainly, you know, I know somebody's seeing a client at the moment where she's been seeing her for a long time, and she has said, I think this woman would have committed suicide if it wasn't for our work together. And I think sometimes the fact that there is somebody there to listen, to talk through your issues, may just enable you to function and to carry on with very difficult stuff. And we do see people who've got family trauma, who've got, you know, relationship breakups, all sorts of things.
I think from a work perspective, sometimes I've seen techniques that can not necessarily stop people having stress, but can limit it, and to some extent, so as you said, stop it getting much worse. And certainly whilst we've been in lockdown and all been in our homes, that's been a particular theme of some of the teams that I work with as part of mental health first aid work that I do, in terms of ideas and tips and tricks, and certainly one of them, which links in with the theme this year of this week of nature, is getting out and having a walk, and getting some fresh air, which is so easy to say, and I know, speaking personally, it's not always as easy as it sounds to actually do when you're busy and you've got lots of things happening, but that certainly can help. And I know personally it's helped me, yeah, when lots is happening at work, and just having a walk around the local park can definitely make a difference. A question on a different, in terms of, have you seen anything, have you seen a major change either in the volume or types of requests for counselling during the last year or so, or has it been broadly the same types of things people have been looking for support on?
I think it's been the same usual kind of issues. I mean, obviously, while people have been more isolated, sometimes there are problems, you know, relationship problems, for example, that have been exacerbated by the fact that husband and wife might be at home together. And also, of course, people are homeschooling and all of that. So some of those things have exacerbated the usual kind of issues. But I think otherwise, you know, we do tend to see the whole gamut of issues. And interestingly, the whole gamut of people from different parts of the Jewish community. Oh, excuse me. Oh, gonna sneeze. Yeah, you know, we see people from the very orthodox to completely non-practicing, but yeah, different kinds of issues. And I do agree with you about walking. I mean, I'm a great walker, and you know, I think for many of us, walking in the countryside or, you know, green bits of London has been a real tonic and a very significant part of managing in the pandemic. But of course, at Raphael, with counselling, it's about something else as well. So while it might be really good that people are walking, they also sometimes need to have an opportunity to talk through their issues. It looks like David Oliver's got.
I've just unmuted him. I think he was.
Okay.
I think that's what he was looking for.
Okay.
So it's my turn. There's something that's bugged me for quite a long time. And it kicked off when I was listening to a woman. There was a radio program, and they're talking about stress. And people were, it was a phone-in thing, and people phoning in, mostly I would guess middle-aged people or down, and they were talking about, did I have stress today? Typing I was doing, and my boss was stressing me, and this was happening, and that was happening, and people complaining about. I suppose it gave them stress in their world, and then a woman came on to the phone, and she said to me, "Look, I was born during the war." She said, "You have got no idea what stress is. Stress is like a smoke salmon sandwich. It's so pathetic." She said, "All of a sudden, we used to hear these whistles. Everybody ran down to the underground stations. The bombs go off. When they came out, they didn't even know whether her husband was alive, whether the houses were still there." She said, "That's what you call stress." And I can, I mean, I wasn't born then, but I can understand that as stress. But now my daughter, oh, I'm so stressed out. You know, the kids of today seem to use that word, and I just don't think it's the right word.
Okay, thank you. I think that I don't think you can compare different people's experience of stress. I mean, you know, obviously we do hear stories about the war, and obviously, you know, if we're in this, you know, in my generation of people who, you know, grew up in London and, you know, didn't go through the war, I have no idea what that experience was like, except from hearing it from my parents. But I think at Raphael, we really take seriously whatever somebody's experience is, so that, you know, whereas somebody who went through the war will experience things in particular ways, somebody who didn't go through the war will experience their own stresses and difficulties, whether it's in their relationships, whether it's in managing their family, whether it's in managing work. And I think what's really important, certainly as counsellors, is we take seriously whatever people bring, because that is their experience.
I think from what Phil was saying was a line I used a number of years ago, that sometimes life gets in the way of living, and it does. It's tough sometimes, and we all try and juggle our lives and try to make everything work. And so, yeah, and stress in everybody is different, but the most minor of stress in one person, it could be so much more major than what we believe is the worst in people's lives. Stephen Eisen, I'll bring you in if you'd like to unmute.
Whilst you're doing that, I think I've found sometimes that something that can be stressful one day for you, another day won't faze you at all. So sometimes it's what else is happening around, not necessarily just yourself, but yeah, it's very much around dependent upon what's happening, I think.
Stephen Eisen, you're with us.
Yeah, just a quick question, and that is with regards to availability of counsellors. If somebody phones up requiring counselling, approximately how long does it normally take you to allocate a counsellor to that person?
Well, that's a very good question. And the problem is that it does vary, so that we've had periods when we have very few clients and a huge number of counsellors available. And at the moment, we have a huge number of clients and not enough counsellors. So it's such a difficult question to answer, because what we've done on the whole for the last few months is we've really been able to find somebody a counsellor very quickly. So I would say within 2 or 3 weeks, which is amazing. Whereas I think at the moment, people are going to have to wait for some time.
Yeah.
And it's partly dependent on the times they can do. Because as I say, if somebody says, I can only do an evening, we've got to have a counsellor who's available on the evening that they can do, and a room, if while we were working in premises, a room that's available.
If I can go on about that a little bit, there are some, I work for Jewish Care, by the way, I'm a support practitioner, and there are some clients who phone up the Jewish Bereavement Counselling Service, and they phone yourself up, and some of them are so stressed out, perhaps caring for a spouse, that they cannot commit to a regular time. It's so difficult. All we can do then is to refer them to the Jewish Helpline, or to SANE, or to Samaritans, or to Silverline, or whatever. But there are people who fall in between the cracks inevitably. But there's nothing one can really do.
I mean, I'm glad, it's nice to make your acquaintance, somebody who's at Jewish Care, because we have had quite a lot of contact with Jewish Care. We do, hopefully, on an ongoing basis. And that is an issue. But, it's very difficult, because I think it's really important that counselling is weekly at the same time. But you're right that for some people that isn't going to work.
I can't do it sometimes,
Yeah. And also, of course, we get people who may not be mobile, who want to be seen at home. And we can't always offer that. I mean, sometimes we have been able to, but then you've got to have a counsellor who's prepared to do that, to go into somebody's home. So, it is difficult. It's complicated. Thank you for raising that.
Thank you.
As counsellors, have you ever had to encounter situations where a client has either been violent towards, attacked a counsellor? And what happens in those instances? I assume you have to bring in a second person, but I mean, the first time this happens, have these issues been encountered?
I have not experienced that ever. And I have been working as a therapist for over 30 years. And I have never yet encountered a violent client. And I'm not aware that that's ever happened at Raphael either. I thought you were going to say, and what we do encounter is people threatening suicide and people being violent to other people, which has happened. But again, it's been very rare. But no, I have, in all the years I've been practicing, and I supervise counsellors, in other organisations, I have never actually encountered a client being violent towards a counsellor. So it may well, I'm sure it does happen occasionally, but it must be incredibly rare.
I asked that. My wife is a journalist, and she was the editor for Jewish Care's, all of Jewish Care's magazines until about 4 years ago. And I know that she, on occasion, was asked to go and interview somebody and was told you need to take somebody with you just in case.
No,
in some of those instances.
No, we've never experienced that. What we do say, however, is that people cannot counsel in premises where there is no receptionist. So that there needs, we do, even though I'm saying, you know, we've never encountered that, we're very mindful that people are in a space where they can summon help if they needed to. So, as I say, in the Martin B. Cohen Centre, there is always a receptionist, and there are panic buttons in the counselling rooms. So, yeah, you're right. One needs, even though I'm saying I've never encountered it, we always have to be mindful that could happen. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Again, with physical issues, I come back and making a distinction. I don't know whether I should or not, or whether it's wrong of me to do so. But you mentioned where people could only make an evening, but in terms of speaking to you and seeking counselling, at the same level, if somebody had twisted their ankle, they would take the afternoon off work necessarily to go to see a doctor. But what you're saying is that people are being specific about the times and they would wait. And aren't there instances where some of these people should be, if they are suicidal or otherwise, wouldn't it be better in some cases that they're seen sooner rather than later?
Well, if we can, we would certainly do that.
Yeah, I'm not being critical. I'm just asking a question.
No, I didn't experience it as critical. No, you're absolutely right. Obviously, if we felt that somebody was in serious distress and maybe suicidal, we would try and see them more quickly. But you have to have somebody who's available and who's suitable. And we do have psychiatric backup. We have an honorary psychiatrist if we were concerned about somebody being suicidal. But of course, you know, there are places like the Samaritans, there's the Jewish helpline, as Stephen mentioned. You know, there are places that people can contact in an emergency. But obviously we try and offer help as quickly as we can. You know, I am concerned about the fact that we've got a waiting list at the moment. Yeah. It's not something that I would choose, but at the same time, you know, people contact us wanting to join as counsellors, and I am very careful about who I take on. You know, they have to be people who I really feel are going to offer a good service to our clients.
Do you often get people contacting you and say, my husband, my wife, my girlfriend, my child doesn't see that they have a problem, but I would like you to talk to them?
Yeah, and I sometimes think that's such a, I know that it's I don't know whether it's only Jews that do that. I'm sure that non-Jews do that, but we, you know, I do, even as working privately where I don't only see Jewish clients. Often it's the Jewish clients who will ring up and say, I want you to see my son or daughter. And we always say they need to contact us themselves, because if somebody is going to have counselling, they need to recognise that they've got an issue, and they need, again, they're not going to come because their mum says you need to go to counselling, or their husband, wife, or whatever. So that is one of our basic requirements. We always say, and we do often get a parent, a spouse or whatever saying, please, can you see this person? And we will always say they have to contact us themselves.
Yeah, it's a bit like when my wife said, when I'm complaining about something, my stomach or whatever, and after about 3 weeks, my wife said, stop complaining, go and see the doctor. It's
yeah, yeah.
But I don't listen to her. Viv, if you would unmute yourself. There we are. You're on.
Yeah, I was just asking you, I have been ill, which unfortunately it caused later post-traumatic epilepsy, which causes severe depression, which this 1 year isolation is a nightmare. But how do you work out the difference when someone's depressed or going mad?
Right. It's a really difficult question, and you know, that sounds a really hard thing to go through. And of course, you know, counselling can only offer a limited amount. We can offer people to have the opportunity to talk about their depression, but of course, if there are physical causes as well, we can't necessarily help with that. And sometimes people are severely depressed, and you know, counselling isn't going to help them, or they might come for counselling and then find that it's not really helping. I mean, there are people who, in the end, the counselling doesn't work with. You know, there are bound to be some, as with anything, where it's not the right thing. But, you know, a lot of the people we see, counselling does help.
I haven't had counselling because what they call it, sorry, I shouldn't say they, it's called invisible cognitive process. So having, first of all, you're not allowed to drive. I have been lucky, I've survived. And I've had a son who's, without any help, has got my arms to work, and I'm active. So the physical, with which Royal London discharged me with nothing. And but when someone can see it in your face, it's like, but from the other side, unfortunately, and sometimes I think it's very, very unusual, I got my long memory back, which you're not supposed to, and then my short memory. So I can see that old person, but I can't get that old person back. And I suppose, sorry to go on, but unfortunately, the rest of your family and friends have gone because they see another person, and I can't see another person.
Yeah.
So there must be something that I'm doing. But I have to say, when you said about suicidal, the epilepsy pills, they are the side effects. And when I didn't have, there was a time during this year, I did actually call the Samaritans, and they did phone back because they knew I was commit suicide, because I called for help. It was the last thing, as you said, your last thing.
Yeah, thank you.
And you get someone to talk to you because they don't want you to commit suicide.
No, that's right. Yeah.
That's very interesting talk. Thank you very much, listening to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Viv. Out of interest, are you required, or do you take it? Are you required to contact a person's GP before you talk to them or after?
Okay, that's an interesting question, because the original group of analysts, you know, going back, I don't know how many years, did used to contact people's GP. That was as a matter of course. And the practice has changed. And what we do at Raphael is we always take the name of somebody's GP and we say that we would like to contact them. We get their permission to contact their GP. But if somebody says, I don't want you to contact my GP, I don't want it to go on my medical records, for example, for insurance purposes or something like that, what we say is we need to have the name and details of your GP, but we will only contact them if we're concerned about you and only with your permission.
Right. Okay. Thank you. David, did you want to ask a question? You have to unmute yourself.
Thank you. No, I was just thinking, but what is the average age? Because the way that you talk, it could be children, middle age, old age. Is there any average?
Of clients?
Yeah.
Okay, we don't see children, so people have to be 18 and up. We do have statistics. I mean, I would say that we don't get many 18 to 20-year-olds, but I think the average age is probably in their 30s, 40s. You know, we really do see people from 20 to 90.
Nothing to do with marriage.
Nothing to do with marriage?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Well, that's marriageable age, isn't it? 25.
Oh, I see. No, it's just we don't see, you know, there are services that work with young people, and that's a very specific kind of training, working with young people and adolescents, children and adolescents. It's a different kind of training. So that's the one thing we don't do. But yeah, otherwise we see adults from, as I say, 18 and up.
Okay, thank you, David. I think.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? We are approaching.
No, nothing else coming in at the moment.
It's dead on 9 o'clock, so that's perfect.
Great.
Well, without Martin Corn wishes to, could you? Would you unmute yourself, Martin? And then there we are. We can hear you now.
Thank you very much indeed, Sara. What I'd be interested to hear is I think what people would like to know is how do people actually contact Raphael? Could you give them the number? Could David perhaps display it somehow, just so that people have it tucked away in case they need it in the future?
Yeah. Yeah, we have, do people want the number? We have a free phone number, which is 0800 234 6236. And that is, as I said, it's a permanent answer phone, but it is checked several times a day. And we also have an email, info@raphaeljewishcounselling.org. And you can go on our website, which is www.raphaeljewishcounselling.org, to find out more information. So that's how to contact us, and you're very welcome to do so. Yeah, thank you, Martin.
Thank you. If there's nothing further, I'd just like to say thank you to Sara for being here this evening. A very interesting talk, and obviously this week in particular, which is the Mental Health Awareness Week, and it's something we do need to be aware of, and it's something which we obviously can't see. Obviously, if you see somebody limping, you know they have a bad leg, but you don't often know, and sometimes it's about care and concern for people who may well be suffering from that. So again, thank you for sparing the time to come and speak to us this evening, and I thank everybody else for being here this evening. If I could just finish, and I can't remember the gentleman's name who's joining us next week, but he is the founder of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, and it should be a very interesting talk. David will tell me the name because I've forgotten.
It's a very famous, I was going to say Nazi killer, but it's Gideon Falter, and he runs this CAA, which is one of the top anti-Semitism, fighting anti-Semitism over here. And he'll be on next week.
He's on next week. Again, thank you very much, Sara. I wish you well. I wish you well, and continued success in all that you do.
Thank you. Thank you.
And again, thank you to everybody. I'm going to turn off our link, if I can get that.
She did it very well.
And he did. He asked a lot of interesting
Yes,
questions.
yes.
I have now ended